President Cyril Ramaphosa says he remained in his deputy president position under former President Jacob Zuma to try and bring about change. He defended his decision to stay on while state capture was allegedly ongoing. Ramaphosa says this was so that he could lead change from within.
If you say, as you've just said, had I chosen another option, I would have been fired. There's only one person who would have fired you.
Indeed.
That's the former president.
Yes.
In your evidence thus far, Mr. President, you've...
Let me just say, it's not so much that one was afraid of being fired. It was much more about seeking, as I said, to stay in, to bring about the change. It was not so much that one wanted to hold on to this position at all costs. No, I mean, even being in that position, a person like me was a great sacrifice, because one's life would have been a lot easier and much more pleasant. But it was to stay in, to bring about the change that we are leading and proceeding forward with now.
To help me unpack a little bit closer what the president has been saying in his testimony at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture today, I'm joined by political analyst Ongama Mtimka, energy expert Professor Sampson Mamphweli, as well as OUTA CEO Wayne Duvenage. You're a part of this conversation tonight on WhatsApp by sending us your questions and comments. We're asking the question, do you believe the president's version? 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on In Focus.
Nice to be there.
Good evening, Thabo. Thank you for having us.
Ongama, let me start with you. We've heard the president's version. During the years of state capture, he was pretty much kept in the dark, even though there were glaring red flags, to which he also admits. One was the issue being raised by Fikile Mbalula within the party. Secondly, where, of course, the media reports and civil society raising all those issues, including, of course, issues around ESCOM and so on and so forth. But the president says those red flags were just not enough. It's only when Des van Rooyen was appointed that he began to really stand up and say, no, this is wrong, because this was now the ultimate capture of state. Do you believe what you've heard?
I don't believe it at all, Thabo. So a number of things that the president sought to achieve here. I think that, one, he wanted to show he himself seeks to be answerable, even though he didn't give much answers to some of the things and was evasive. And two, I think he wanted to manage the situation as far as how his comrades perceive this process, managing the sellout rhetoric, so that the sellout decampaigning, so that as he presents, he does things that appear to save the organization from further embarrassment and try and stymie the onslaught that's on the ANC rightfully on the basis of its failure to act when it was needed. Otherwise, I mean, if you take his action around, for example, what his chosen approach was, what he doesn't say among those 5 options is quite clearly that 2 things. One, as people within the party, they preferred proxy battles that were waged by executives and members of boards in these organizations that were fighting against state capture, more than them outrightly defending those people in public. If his response that Mr. Molefe had all that he could in order to manage the situation was empowered enough. Yeah. And then also, secondly, what he doesn't say is that part of the reason why he had to lie low was precisely his presidential ambitions. I don't take the idea he's advancing that the considerations were more, sacrificial, the way that he puts it. Fact of the matter is that all these politicians, by the way, in Polokwane, okay, maybe him not, but in Polokwane, they were in support of Jacob Zuma. The president in Mangaung, he was in that faction. So, and at that time already, there were allegations of corruption, and in fact, Shabir Sheikh had already been convicted. So he supported Jacob Zuma, knowing fully well that there was a potential for things to go south in the manner that they did.
Is it believable, Ongama, this idea that he was fighting quiet battles? He says not all in the cabinet were complicit. Some didn't acquiesce to the state capture project. In fact, some were fighting quiet battles. For example, the whole question of an inquiry into the banks when they decided to close the accounts of the Gupta family.
I'm willing to give him a benefit of doubt only on the question of interventions, for example, with regards to the Des Van Ryn's appointment. Besides that, there's no evidence, in my view, of particularly him, being a line of defense. I know that at some stage, Pravin Gordhan, Tabisi Jonas were sort of allowed to be victimized by former President Jacob Zuma, with them actually being there. And also in those times when the attempts were made at the party political level to get Jacob Zuma to account, I don't remember seeing his name among the people that were taking the right action at the right platform in order to deal with state capture.
When speaking of taking action, the president says, well, I've only began to see change when it happened, but all these things I was hearing either from the media or civil society or Chapter 9 institution. Giving testimony today as the former deputy president, now as the president, but also as the deputy president of the ANC then. The president says, even though you yourself as civil society were aware of this underworld that was operating, as a man sitting in cabinet, as a man sitting second in charge, he didn't know.
Yeah, look, hindsight is always an exact science, and you can make that story look believable now, but it doesn't hold much credibility when you put yourself into the time zone of when these things were unfolding. I think we sit here, civil society, saying, the best of a bad bunch now happens to be in power. I mean, heaven knows what would have happened had the Zuma faction held on to power or somebody else coming into being. There are changes that are being made now. But there's a lot of credibility questions or lack of credibility questions when you see the continuation of people in Parliament like David Mahlobo, Zizi Kodwe, Gwede Mantashe, Ayanda Dlodlo, many people who have been tainted and being implicated seriously throughout the commission and prior to that, still sitting in cabinet. And so we see that the president appears to be focused on keeping the ANC together and losing sight of what is really happening in the country. So the credibility question mark is there. He couldn't have missed all of this stuff under his nose at the time. Yes, we know that Jacob Zuma did a lot of things on his own outside of the NEC's understanding very often, but we don't buy the explanations that are provided, and we're really concerned about the continuation of this problem.
Yeah. Does it give you a sense that he's at the helm of an organization that is willing to admit the impact, the adverse impact of cadre deployment on government, but also on our SOEs?
Yes, I think we're starting to get a sense of that, and that has to come out, but it's not coming out forcefully enough. The rhetoric is there. He's saying the right things. He's saying things that we want to hear him say, but the actions aren't being carried through. So, I mean, the cadre deployment strategy and this ruling party putting party before people, had he done, and had they moved fast enough to get that thinking in place, we might have had the right people in the State Security Agency and able to circumvent the problems that we had in the last month with all the looting and destruction that took place in KZN and Gauteng. And yet we hadn't done that. He hasn't done that. And now we sit back with a knee-jerk reaction. I'm afraid it's too little, too late, unless some real serious signs of meaningful change takes place. It's easy to say a lot of the things that he has been saying, but he's finding it very difficult to put some of this in place, and his hands are tied as a result of party politics.
Let's take a break. Professor Sampson Mamphweli, when we return next, give us his views of the events as the president outlined them in the last 2 days. Ongama Mtimka stays with us, as well as Wayne Duvenage. And let's get your views tonight. Do you believe the president's version of events of the years of state capture? 072-110-5584. Otherwise, you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. In Focus.
I did propose him. And they did not carry support.
Yes.
Yes.
And then with regard to Mr. Pravin Gordhan, I think Mr. Gwede Mantashe mentioned in his affidavit, maybe in his oral evidence as well, that Mr. Zuma mentioned also when I think there was a challenge with regard to the intelligence reports that he referred to. When there was a challenge, I assume from within the officials, that Mr. Zuma also said something along the lines that his relationship with Mr. Gordhan had broken down. Is that something you remember?
I do remember that was mentioned.
Yes.
And it did not really find its way into my statement because one was dealing with a whole range of other issues.
Yes.
Yes, he did allude to the fact that his relationship with Mr. Gordhan had actually broken down.
Yes.
All right, welcome back. Live with us on In Focus tonight as we assess the president's version of events at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. Ongama Mtimka, political analyst, Professor Sampson Mamphweli, expert in energy, as well as Wayne Duvenage, CEO of OUTA. Professor Mamphweli, the president, who was deputy president then, served with former President Jacob Zuma. And when it comes to, for example, the appointment that he's talking about there of Brian Molefe, the president chose to divulge his affiliated plans and assessment of the situation and say, no, let's support, or lobbying others say, let's support the appointment of this guy. Yet, again, in the same vein, he paints a picture of a president who didn't bring him into confidence and tell him certain things. For example, about the firing of 3 executives at Eskom and this private meeting that was apparently held at Nkandla. Is this by design? Is this deliberate?
Thank you, Thabo. Yeah, I've looked at the testimony from the energy point of view, what was happening at Eskom, what happened when the president took over when he became the state president himself. So the way I read the situation and the events is that I would like to give the president some benefit of a doubt on the energy side of things. He, of course, recommended Brian Molefe, but once Brian Molefe was there were some kind of relationships that Brian had with some Gupta associates, and they started doing things on the background. And if you look at how that panned out, for instance, when Cabinet took a decision to intervene at Eskom through the war room, and the president was then tasked with the chairmanship of the interministerial committee that was providing a political oversight on that war room. There was some resistance. To say some, it's using the light word. There was a lot of resistance internally at Eskom with the people who were working with Brian Molefe, by the people who were working with Mr. Brian Molefe. Mr. Brian Molefe himself stopped attending the meetings of the technical war room because that's where people were starting to ask difficult questions because the president, who was then deputy president, was starting to dig deep into what was happening at ESCOM. And if you move further a bit, you look at the testimony of Mr. Brian Molefe and Mr. Koko himself. I've engaged Mr. Koko in some of the forums around these issues. They tried to implicate the president, but there's nothing really tangible that you can say this is what the president did wrong. If you look at from the Glencore Optimum issues and everything else, there's no real tangible evidence that implicates the president. And why they're trying so hard to implicate the president, I think is because of the interventions that he was trying to bring in and with their resistance on their side. Mr. Brian Molefe himself, at the same State Capture Commission, considered that there was no evidence linking the president to any wrongdoing, apart from the fact that he was concerned about the cooling period between 2012 and the time that the war room was set up, that the president was then tasked with political oversight. So I would like to give him a benefit of a doubt on that. And looking at what is happening now in the reforms that is bringing in the energy space, the plans that is advocating for, the announcements that is making, you can see that this is someone who is very much concerned about the economy of the country. You can see this is someone who is concerned about the energy security of the country. He's coming with brilliant plans. I would like to agree with my two other colleagues. The president may be sitting with the wrong people under him or around him. So he's got visions a vision that other people are not able to implement. That's my reading of the situation.
So, I mean, does this, in a sense, put to rest the whole narrative, for example, around the appointment of Brian Molefe, that he was put there by the Guptas, or he was put there by Lynn Brown to capture the state-owned entity? I mean, hearing that the president himself recommended Brian Molefe to be the group CEO.
So when you look at it, there are two ways to it. One is that the president himself recommended Mr. Brian Molefe to the then president Jacob Zuma, and Minister Lynn Brown also recommended Mr. Brian Molefe to President Jacob Zuma. Now, we don't know the reason behind the recommendation that was made by Minister Lynn Brown. Maybe my other colleagues will assist me in that. But in terms of the president himself, he looked at the profile of Mr. Brian Molefe. He looked at what Brian Molefe did when he was still at Transnet and all that. And then he saw him as a very qualifying kind of candidate to sit in that position. And I agree with him. If you look at Mr. Brian Molefe's profile, it's breathtaking. He's got some very good profile. The problem is that what did he do after being appointed? He forged relationships with the wrong people, and he ended up playing the shenanigans that he did with Optimum and Glen and Tegeta.
Yeah, Ongama, President admitting in a sense that he got involved in the firing of Mr. Koko at ESCOM. Was he cornered? Did he put himself in trouble there? Was he aware that he was, in a sense, saying he interfered and acted in an illegal manner, in a sense?
That's one part, Thabo, at the time that the president was dealing with. I actually had stepped out and then only saw reports about it. And the only part that I saw was around him talking to the issue of how, as government, as a shareholder, had every right to intervene. And it's not political meddling when they intervene. So I'm not able to give substantive critical analysis on that part, unfortunately.
Right. The idea that some chose to be strategic, and I think that's the word that he used, and they stayed on, even though they didn't acquiesce to the project of state capture, but were there strategically. I mean, how much weight does that hold, considering that those factions are still continuing within the party even today?
So how we understand that bit is very crucial also to addressing the question Judge Zondo asked the president towards the closing today as to what satisfaction can the president give us that we may not see a return of state capture. So part of the reason why they would have acted in that way, they call it strategic, it may be survival, whatever the case may be, is that, you see, ANC politicians are a part of the ANC as a system. And the configuration of power and power networks in the ANC it permits certain things and punishes certain things. So the president himself, in the way in which he has answered questions today and how he has conducted executive authority in government and how they behaved during the time of state capture, is not a function of, it's not a trait that is independent of the making of political power in the ANC. It's a permanent feature of how ANC politicians will behave, precisely because in order for one to remain in their position, they have to belong to a complex power network from national to regional and to provincial and regional levels. And so when they act in that space, they are mindful of how they may be weakening their position within that complex power constellation. So my view is that beyond acting altruistically or in a way that helps them remaining to fight within, they would have had greater sensitivity to their own survival, precisely because not only would it affect them immediately at the time, but also their future prospects, because it would have dislodged them. It explains why President Cyril Ramaphosa chooses to be in the Zuma faction, because he understood how the workings of power in the party work to guarantee one's future success in party politics. So my view is that their behavior can be explained a lot more by understanding power dynamics in the party as a permanent feature of the party, notwithstanding the changes that President Cyril Ramaphosa is making. I mean, the limitedness of those changes are seen in the cabinet reshuffle because they are a permanent feature of the conduct of politics within the party, up until the time when the ANC reforms the processes of leadership selection to the extent that people can campaign among the rank and file membership freely, as opposed to having to depend on alliances from region to national.
Let's talk more on this permanent feature when we continue next. Ongama Mtimka, Professor Sampson Mamphweli, as well as Wayne Duvenage. Your views tonight, 072-110-5584. You heard the version of events by President Cyril Ramaphosa. You believe what was given as testimony at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture? Let us know your views tonight. In Focus continues in a moment.
Mr. Nene gave evidence before this commission. He said that story was fabrication. Effectively, you are saying there was nothing like I was really being released to go to that position. And I was hoping that Mr. Zuma, when he came here, excuse me, could deal with that as well. So I don't know whether you want to comment on that. Certainly, the media statement that was released by President Zuma at the time spoke very highly of Mr. Nene as finance minister, which did not suggest that he did not trust him.
Let me just say, Chairperson, it was political speak, and it's best to leave it there.
Yeah. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
The chess game at Treasury also coming into sharp focus, that the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. So to some instance, the President unable to also answer about some of these events that took place. Ongama Mtimka, Professor Sampson Mamphweli, as well as Wayne Duvenage still with us. Wayne, of course, the big one was the Project Spiderweb, which was some intelligence report that was used to call back the then Minister of Finance and his deputy back into the country to be fired, essentially, which, of course, created quite a stir within the civil society movement. What was actually happening at that particular point in time, and the type of attack that was going in at Treasury? And did President Cyril Ramaphosa outline today and bring clarity as to what was going on there?
Yeah, look, I mean, very clearly at the time, the president, then Jacob Zuma, was trying to get elements of his faction into controlling the purse strings at Treasury, because we saw a lot of gatekeeping with regards to conduct that was trying to keep the hands out of the till. And I'm not sure whether, it was when Nene went initially that the president, or the current president, stepped in, but we didn't hear enough when Pravin Gordhan was removed on, I think it was the 30th or the end of March 2017, which sparked a big uprising in civil society and the marches around the country within a week. It was good to see how civil society meshed together and got up and started speaking out a lot louder. And those were the last days of Jacob Zuma's last few months of his rule up until December 2017. I don't get a sense that we got a lot from Cyril Ramaphosa on that, other than the fact that I think we do know he was starting to speak up. We do know that he was raising concerns around state capture. And I think at that stage he was locked into December 2017, the ANC national elections, and he realized that there was an opportunity and a chance to bring about change. And so it was that speak that we heard today about his reasoning that started to probably play out more in that last 6 months of 2017 than it did prior to all of that, where so much of state capture was happening up until that time. So, look, I think for us, we need to move forward, and we do have a president that has the intention to take us in the right direction. A lot has been put in place, so we mustn't forget that. But today's, the last couple of days, testimony has been a guarded one, I think, and one that the president, you can see politics at play. This is politics all the way through. But I think, as Ongama has pointed out, we have a mechanism, a machination of politics within the ruling party that gives rise to this current chaos that this country cannot afford. And I'm afraid it's going to remain with them until some bold leadership standing up to undo this way of government.
Did the president fall short of that boldness? I mean, in his remarks, he keeps referring to the fact that state capture would have required certain individuals to make it happen. But I'm not sure he has actually named any of those individuals.
Yeah, I think it's coming out in the wash as we go deeper into the state and into the commission's work. But those individuals are, and I think he needs to be a little bit bolder. It is the kingpins. State capture needs people on the inside and the outside. The outside people, largely the Guptas and their whole business network. Inside were all the appointees from Brian Molefe and within the state-owned institutions themselves, within Denel, within SAA. We saw it all directed by the kingpin, Jacob Zuma himself. Let's not beat around the bush, and went through a very, very structured process. Although one wants to believe that the current president didn't see this, that he was caught up, and I guess he didn't see quite a lot because a lot was happening behind the scenes. But he had the opportunity to speak up a lot sooner. here we are today. It's what happens going forward, which we believe is very, very important. The grounds and the foundations for good stuff is now in place. But are we going to build the walls now? Are we going to fix it? And are we going to do it quick enough?
Yeah. Prof, did the president act at all at Eskom when he witnessed change? Because he says, look, he didn't know much, but what he did know was what he was beginning to witness when things were being done, particular changes, and particularly at board levels and at top leadership. I mean, at some point, they say they brought this matter to the president, for example, around PRASA, and the president and the top six chose not to act, and others were saying, well, you chose not to act deliberately because you wanted that board to fail, so you can put another board there of your liking.
I would say the president tried to act, but diplomatically so, like he was indicating himself, to say there was a limit to what he could do because he was not the head of state. And he was working from within the system. So, for instance, if you look at the nuclear deal, that resulted in what happened at the National Treasury with the ministers being removed and all that. That was part of the pushback strategy by the president and the people who were working with him to say, no, we cannot allow things like this to happen. We can only imagine the impact that the nuclear deal, for instance, would have done in the economy of this country. Yeah. One, it was going to be very expensive. Two, it was going to take very long to build. Three, if you look at what happened at Kusile and Medupi, taking 14 years to build the 4,000-something megawatts, and even when you complete it, it's still blowing up today. And those are some of the things that the president, during that time, he tried his best to try and stop. Yeah. And I think we should give him a benefit of a doubt along those lines.
But even so, though, Prof, I'm going to let you continue in a moment. Even so, let's speak of those system failures, particularly on the nuclear deal. For example, he says members of cabinet and the right departments made numerous presentations to cabinet to say, look, we can't afford this at this particular point in the country. Yet the systems fail, and it's still unexplained right now. How did the systems fail in order for example, Ntathelene to find himself at a conference and being called in to say, no, you need to sign this thing because this thing needs to go through?
Yes, like the president himself indicated, to say there were limitations. So I would bring in Ongama there to say, if you know the way the ANC operates, the person who is in charge is the president. His word is final, and if you look at the political landscape, how it changed towards 2017 and beyond, yeah. You can see that the only time that Jacob Zuma lost power, or former President Jacob Zuma lost power, and he couldn't really push forward with his deals, was towards the end of his term. And that was when people were starting to push back and to kind of reposition themselves, so to speak, yeah. within the organization. So, that's the political side.
So I mean, in a sense, this idea that blame it on system failure is hogwash. Blame it on the ANC.
Yeah, well, okay, sorry, Ongama, you can go ahead.
Sorry, Prof, sorry,
No, Ongama, you can come in, yeah?
Oh, sure. That's precisely the point, by the way, that when there's state capture, it builds parallel systems, parallel processes, and the intention is for the main visible state not to function, so that the shadow government can function and feed the patronage networks. Yes, indeed, I agree with that sentiment that it's the party that's a challenge, and it's debilitating effect on government, and we're seeing this throughout the country. That's why we cannot. Yes, indeed, we must be excited with what's happening at a national level, but come to municipalities and provinces and see the extent to which the momentum of self-destructive behavior at the level of the party and its consequences on the state is irreversible. So the president, in my view, is administering the manner of death of the ANC, as opposed to its resurrection, if you like. It's good that he's able to kind of give some sense of a change of direction at a national level in ways that position him and his camp to be able to build, okay? But if you look at the long-term effects of the destruction that took place over the past post-Polokwane period, it's impossible for that to be worked on in this period. The only solace for South Africa is that the system is greater than its constitutive parts, and it's greater than the ANC. So we survive, and the Republic is going to survive, precisely because you've got a constitutional court that works, a civil society that works, and opposition parties that are able to augment their power by theatrics and use of courts in order to advance, to fight another day. And also there's a declining dominant party system. That's our salvation. The fact that the dominant party is declining and is going to be reduced to such an extent that it's not unthinkable to see the politics of the UK begin to happen here. Otherwise, the complete reliance on the renewal initiatives, while good and helps, some stewardship of the economy in this interim period, our ultimate salvation doesn't come from the ANC, unfortunately. It comes from the system itself.
Ongama Mtimka, Professor Sampson Mamphweli, and Wayne Duvenage. We wrap up this conversation when we return in a moment, as we, of course, wrap up our conversation tonight with a panel on President Cyril Ramaphosa's testimony at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. Ongama Mtimka, Professor Sampson Mamphweli, and Wayne Duvenage. Ongama, before the break, I was saying the ANC statement on President Cyril Ramaphosa's testimony says, one, he's going there to clarify things that were not clear in his previous appearance, but secondly, to complete evidence that was previously presented, particularly around cadre deployment. But this one I found very interesting, to say that they also believe that this is a way of showing that the ANC respects and continues to respect the institutions that are in the country, which are the institutions that you were talking about. Part of this exercise, was it about saving the image, or at least cleansing the image of the ANC in the public, following the fact that, of course, the former president did not want to appear there?
It's very good, actually. In fact, so we may be complaining about the quality of the responses, which, by the way, in themselves are confirming that, in fact, state capture did happen and the ANC was complicit. So whether or not the answers were given to help us understand that deeper is besides the point. But you could see from forgetfulness, among other things, that the answer is very clear. The ANC at the time relied on proxy battles that could be waged elsewhere rather than its own agency at the time. So that's a very clear message. But it's an important message, this one, even though it's spin, but it's an important one, that they subject themselves to the processes. And for me, seeing the President of the Republic sitting there, answering questions, even though they managed the nervousness with the giggles, was so important, and it's very rare. Notwithstanding the quality of questions, the spectacle itself is important for driving home the idea that power is limited, political power is limited.
When did, of course, the president, or let me say, did the commission probe deep enough? I mean, others will come out and say the president was, to an extent, maybe left off the hook.
Yeah, I guess one could always argue that there could have been more probing and tougher questions. But I get a sense that given the state of the situation and where the commission is now in its final stages, the president didn't skip being there. He was asked some tough questions, and he put his version of the facts on the table as far as he can see it. And I think what leaves us a little bit frustrated is just this pace. For instance, the president brought about the proclamation himself that the State Capture Commission can share the information and the resources with the NPA before the report is released. And yet he's saying himself, well, we want to see this report and we'll go through it and then we'll take action. That's not what we need to hear. We need to hear that action is going to be taken as this evidence has been coming to the fore over the last couple of years. We can't wait. If we wait till the report is finished and then to unpack it and see who needs to go and who needs to be fired, we can give them that information right now. He knows who those people are. But I guess, as Ongama is saying, this political machinery is at play now, and I guess he's got to play this game of chess very carefully. Because, as we were saying in the break, the next ANC election is not so far away, and you have to position yourself so if you want to get that second term, and possibly thereafter, the big change that we're all hoping for. But can our economy survive that long? Can it's just so sad to see poverty just slipping deeper and deeper into this hole, the inequality gap growing, and if we just don't get started sooner.
Prof, can Eskom survive this long game if action is not taken sooner?
Well, Eskom needs a lot of interventions. I'm one of the lucky ones because I happen to know some of the changes that are happening at Eskom. I'm privy to their just transition strategy, which we also assisted to work with them. I must say Eskom is in good hands as we see it now, because from the CEO all the way, we are able to interact with them. They're able to take expert advice, and one can only wish that government, and I've been saying this, that government can constitute a panel of experts like they did with the COVID-19 pandemic, to look at the energy side of things and stabilize security of supply, working with Eskom. So Eskom has done quite a lot they've got a lot of good plans. The Department of Energy as well is being pushed to the limit by the president. If you look at the announcements that the president made around the amendments to the Electricity Regulation Act, allowing the generation of 100 megawatts, of up to 100 megawatts without a generation license. That's a big, big step. Allowing municipalities to buy from independent power producers, that's a big step. Also, the green finance that Eskom is working on, for which we also assisted at the University of Stellenbosch, is going to assist them greatly in trying to deal with the current debt that they have. So I must say, we see those kind of reforms, and one can only wish that we have some form of continuity in the next 2 to 3 years, because if some changes politically happens in the next year or two, then we may lose on this light at the end of the tunnel, as I may put it.
All right, let's quickly get to the views of our viewers tonight. Let's have a look at what you're saying tonight on Twitter. This is from Mr. Mugwena saying Mr. Ramaphosa was a leader of government business as deputy president of the country. Now he can't tell us he knew nothing about what was happening at SOEs. My take is that Mr. Ramaphosa is a good liar and he lies with a straight face. Ramaphosa is very dangerous than we think. At Teko Mugwena on Twitter, on WhatsApp tonight from Ebisho Q saying just like that long SIU report that we have been waiting for on Zweli Mkhize, there is another long wait for the country on the State Capture Commission report. And Anne in Belleville saying President Cyril Ramaphosa is a hero who is standing firm on corruption. Although he is slow, he is doing something. All ethical South Africans should support him. Once again, that sentiment on the long game. Ongama, let's Maybe as we wrap up, your thoughts on the report from the Commission of Inquiry. Should we expect that soon? Is he going to sit, deliberate on it again, take the long game, see maybe if there are certain people in there that are mentioned that could possibly jeopardize his second term, and maybe try to sanitize that?
My hope is that the system, again, will work. So I have greater reliance, like Wayne, on the NPA, the Hawks, and others following up on the leads from that process. And by the way, if I understand things correctly, there was some degree of coordination in the activities of these entities to ensure that, for example, witnesses are not apprehended before they present there, or those whom they are going to implicate are not, acted on before the witnesses go there. So I would hope that there is greater coordination and leveraging of the evidence, the affidavits that have been submitted there, because they are just bigger than the report. It's one of those things where you can imagine the tons and tons of information that the State Capture Commission of Inquiry has generated. And to wait for the report would be to setting up the entire process for failure.
Wayne, of course, former President Jacob Zuma did not participate in this particular report. Do you expect that this report will be challenged in court?
Yeah, we expect anything that's going to advance the previous president's Stalingrad strategy. So we expect that, but we can't wait too long. We hope that the commissioner brings the report out within 3 months. I think he's been working on it and building up. So it's not a case of starting only next month or so. I think we can see it coming out shortly, hopefully before the end of the year or early in the new year. And it's going to be a very powerful report, and it's going to take this country forward. It's going to give ammunition to the criminal justice system to start acting, even though they should have been acting already. So, yeah, we wouldn't be surprised if Jacob Zuma and his team do whatever they can to try and rubbish it. But it's not going to work. We're just tired of these shenanigans now. We need to move forward.
Professor Mamphweli, final word from you. Should all South Africans get behind and support this particular report when it comes out?
I would hope so. This is a process that has costed quite a lot of money. And I think all South Africans, including ANC members, should embrace this report. It will help the country, understand what happened during those 9 years. And also, the most important part for me is it will help us avoid those kind of things. I think by just having this commission running, we avoided quite a lot of things, because some people were deterred by seeing exactly what's happening there. You sit at home and you will be out of your mind to think about doing things that were coming out of that commission. So for me, it's more about going forward. What can the country do? The deterrent that it can do in terms of the systems that will be put in place by the president and his party, and some of the systems, by the way, he has already started putting in place, like he was saying himself.
Indeed. Prof, let's leave it there for now. Appreciate your time. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Ongama Mtimka, as well as Wayne Duvenage. And thank you for taking part.